Welcome to the 21st lecture of the Aligarh Society of History and Archaeology, that is ASHA, and Ganga Jamni Heritage. This is our joint venture. Today we have with us Dr. Linda Hess, who is at Stanford University. Her academic career started from the same institution, that is Stanford, from where she completed her graduation, after which she joined Berkeley for completing her post-graduation and then moving on for her research. Her teaching career, on the other hand, commenced from Elphinstone College, Bombay, from where she joined in 1965-66. By 1986, she was at Berkeley and then ultimately joined her original alma mater, Stanford, in 2006, where she has been serving till her retirement in various capacities. She was also twice chosen for the prestigious Fulbright Scholarship, once in 1964-65 and then in 1988, at a time when she actually declined to avail it. Dr. Hess is well known for her works on Kabir. She wrote The Bijak of Kabir in 1983. It was republished as a new edition in 2002. Another work of hers, A Touch of Grace, Songs of Kabir, was published in 1994. She has two other books to her credit, namely Singing Emptiness, Kumar Gandharv Performs the Poetry of Kabir, published in 2009, and Bodies of Song, Kabir, Oral Traditions and Performative Worlds in North India. She has also written a large number of research papers, mostly dealing with religious studies as well as with Kabir. She has also written about Tulsi Das and the Ram Leela of Ramnagar. Currently, she is translating a large collection of Kabir poetry from a Rajasthani manuscript dated 1614 to 21, which is to be published by the Murthy, prestigious, I should say, Murthy Classical Library of India series. Her profile is not only strictly confined to dry academic field. She has also been actively involved in percolating the knowledge about Kabir to the masses through other mediums as well. In 2009, she was the organizer as well as a participant of a 2-month-long tour of Kabir documentary films of Shabnam Virmani and the Kabir singers, which was sponsored by ICCR, Government of India. This tour was organized in the United States of America and Canada. Today, we are fortunate enough to have her with us. She has kindly agreed to speak to us on the religious classes, with her topic being Locating Kabir. Please welcome Professor Dr. Linda Hess. Over to you, Dr. Hess.
Thank you. Well, good evening to everybody in India. It's good morning over here in California, where it's 5:30 a.m. I feel honored to be invited to speak in a seminar at Aligarh, along with the Ganga Jamni. Is it Ganga Jamni Foundation, or is it called just Heritage?
Ganga Jamni Heritage.
Yes. So It's a wonderful combination. I have never been to Aligarh in all the many years that I've been in India, but I do have the greatest respect for that university's historic achievements and its important place in the rich and full culture of India. And it's also an honor to be included in this amazing list of speakers that you've put together. So thank you for inviting me. When I first got the list of talks in this series, there was one empty box that was supposed to be filled by my talk. In the box, it said the religious classes, Sufis, Bhakts, and Sants. Then I later got a poster for the talk, which just said the religious classes with my title, Kabir, Locating Kabir. Just to, as a heads up, you are not going to get a class-based analysis in my talk in the modern sense, even though it says the religious classes. Though Kabir was interested in class in a 15th century sort of way, or 16th century. However, I will be mentioning the categories that were originally listed in that box, Sufis, Bhakts, and Sants, which seem to suggest these distinctions, which I will also be getting to. Sufis as part of Islam, Bhaktas as perhaps referring to the Saguni devotees of God in Hindu forms, especially Krishna, Rama, and Sant, the Nirguni devotees, perhaps it's referring to the Nirguni devotees of God who is beyond form and ritual and must be realized within each person. Now, let's open up the PowerPoint. Are we ready? Can you do that? Okay. I hope yeah. Is that good? Can you see the PowerPoint clearly? I can't hear you at all.
Yes, we can. We can. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. Okay. So with my title, Locating Kabir, I mean to turn our attention to how we identify Kabir, the poet, the person, the tradition, through the long history of poetry attributed to him. So I've shown you a few visual representations of Kabir, and along with that, I've shown you a little snapshot of a page of the manuscript that I'm working on. The Kabir texts are not stable. Kabir didn't write. In a famous couplet, he said, Masi kagad chuo nahi, kalam gaho nahi hath, chare ujug ke Mahatma Kabir mukhi janai baat. I don't touch ink or paper. This hand doesn't grasp a pen. Thoughts of sages through 4 ages, Kabir tells with his mouth alone. Now, we don't know if Kabir really wrote this doha, or not wrote, but composed. But we have good reason to believe that what it says about him is true. There's no evidence whatsoever that he wrote anything himself. So I'm going to present this talk in 2 parts. The first one will stick to my title, Locating Kabir. How do we locate this figure called Kabir amidst the history of poetry attributed to him? Where do we look for him? Now, part 2, I decided to do something different. Because this is Aligarh, I've taken the opportunity to look more closely at references to Muslims and Hindus, including various religious and cultural evocations of both groups. I've also looked at a group of poems that have a prevalence of Perso-Arabic language. We'll only have time for a brief preliminary discussion of these poems, or maybe just a sharing of the poems. But preparing this talk has inspired me to open up a new investigation of the content and language in Kabir's poetry that is associated with Muslim/Sufis and with discourse about Hindus and Muslims. Okay, so first, locating Kabir. Where do we look to find Kabir? To oversimplify it, I'll suggest 2 methodologies. on one hand, study of written and other fixed recorded modes. Usually we used to just say written and oral, but now it makes more sense to say written or visual or even audio recorded, or but fixed records that are going to stay in the same form, that can be traced historically. And the other methodology, immersion in living Kabir traditions as they come forth in music and performance and social contexts. My own career has embodied full pivots from number 1 to number 2 and then back again to number 1. I started with written texts, later plunged into oral traditions, and finally returned to written text in quite a serious way, as I'm now working on a 400-year-old manuscript. But when I went back to focusing on written texts, it was with a different mind and body, a mind and body filled with music and with human lives. At the same time, it was still filled with text. Even when I studied oral tradition, I was intimately engaged in studying texts, the words of the songs that the singers were singing. But those texts operated very differently from the texts that were fixed in books and manuscripts. So just to review the kinds of approaches I've had to locating Kabir in my lifetime, the first project was a study and translation of the Bijak of Kabir, which is regarded as sacred by the Kabir Panth. I also studied the history of important written collections, so I would understand where everything was coming from. The Bijak of Kabir, which was co-translated with Dr. Shukdev Singh of Benares Hindu University, was originally published in 1983. A new edition came out, as our host has mentioned, from Oxford University Press in 2002. This is a picture of that lovely cover of that later edition. And it's remained in print in India all these decades from Motilal Banarsidass. At the turn of the present century, I moved towards something that I had long dreamed about, studying Kabir through oral traditions with singers and listeners in live situations. Going deep into that experience, which lasted from 2002 until the publication of my book in 2015, transformed not only my work, but my life. Now, I thought I had a picture of the book next, but maybe I don't. So no picture of the book. The name of the book is Singing the Bodies of Song, Kabir Oral Traditions and Performative Worlds in North India. And the cover of the book is a famous Kabir folk singer of Malwa, Madhya Pradesh. Many of you may have heard Prahlad Singh Tipania in a very enthusiastic moment of singing with his arms raised. How did it transform my work and my life? Just try this. Try singing day after day, because I got to sing along with them. It's folk music, not classical. And traveling week after week through villages, towns, and cities with the Kabir singers, among devotees and fans, immersed in the physical, emotional, social, musical, imaginative, and intellectual worlds where Kabir is sung and valued. That will change you. It will change the way you think about Kabir's poetry. It won't separate you, though, from studying the poetry, the words, the way they come together and get written down and then get changed and captured in other media, like cassettes, CDs, emails, websites, films, and so on. So these pictures this is, of course, a shot of the first or one of the American tours that I organized for Prahlad Ji and his Mandali, only 4 people. And there I am at the end with the privilege of sitting on stage with them and singing along without a mic. And here's another shot. I mean, we were among Kabir singing groups in so many different settings. Here's a typical village setting. We're in with the women's section right in front of us and going on far into the night. And here is me so happily sitting next to Dev Narayan Sarolia on the violin and having the pleasure and honor of doing some translation during a performance in the United States. In my hand is a gunguru. They trusted me with little bells, nothing more sophisticated than that. And here I am having a great time in the village of Lunyakeri, where Prahladji lives. Oh, here's the book. This is the one that I wanted to show you, the cover of the book. Life is full of surprises. I was entirely caught up with oral traditions, music, the living, breathing, singing, dynamic experience of Kabir. I was eating, drinking, and dreaming oral traditions for 13 years, and I thought of myself at that point as a very different kind of person from the old-fashioned scholars who were studying and editing old manuscripts. But guess what I'm doing now? I'm translating a big manuscript that's 400 years old, collaborating with a very wonderful Czech scholar in Prague, Professor Jaroslav Strinad, who is doing a critical edition of the manuscript while I do the translation, and it's going to be published, we hope, next year. This is turning out to be an incredibly interesting, challenging, sometimes slogging and frustrating, but often amazing and enthralling process. Now, Kabir's poetry has a history. We don't have some original version that we can count on. We have nothing we can count on that was to have been composed, to have come out of Kabir's own mouth. We only have a history of texts. And here's a snapshot of the early records we have of Kabir's poetry. So, oh, sorry, this one says Ask Jack, because I used this slide in a talk I was doing together with Jack Hawley. Anyway, all the evidence suggests that Kabir didn't write anything himself. There's a popular belief that he lived 120 years, from 1398 to 1518. This probably isn't true. Scholars tend to place his birth later, around the 1440s. After that, some sectarian organizations, panths and sampradayas, were very much involved in collecting and writing down bhakti poetry. For Kabir, the most important sources of early written poetry are the Sikh panth and in Punjab, and the Dadu panth in Rajasthan. So the earliest big collection we have is from the Guru Granth Sahib. It was finalized in 1604, but we also have some of the precursor manuscripts, the Goindwal Pothis, that were produced in the 1570s. I'm sorry to say that I have never worked on the Sikh recension of Kabir, which is extremely important for Kabir. I did read all the pads from the Guru Granth Sahib while I was working on my PhD, and I published a comparative study of the three major collections: the Sikhs in Punjab, the Dadu Panthis in Rajasthan, and the Kabir Panthis to the east. But as a translator, I worked first on the Bijak, and now I'm working on this Rajasthani manuscript from the early 17th century. I'm going to give you just a tiny glimpse of what is present in that manuscript, just in terms of categories. There are 370 pads or song poems, or the sort of things that a singer would sing as a bhajan. There are 817 sakhis, often called dohas, which are pithy, aphoristic, rhymed couplets. Then there's a whole bunch of miscellaneous poems put together in a section called Ramayani. So in this manuscript, we get a very good picture of who, quote, Kabir was in a particular location at a particular time, quite early in the history of Kabir texts. That is, who was Kabir among Dadu Panthis in Rajasthan and whoever they were connected with around 1615. So Though we'll never know exactly what came out of Kabir's mouth and what was added to the tradition later, there is a widely shared profile of Kabir. And I could just ask you to think, it might come up later when we have some time for discussion, but what comes to your mind if I ask you to describe Kabir? If Kabir has been in your life, in your culture, how would you characterize him? Just think about that. He's definitely got a profile, and it's not the same as other bhakti poets. I've just put together a few rough categories that might give us a glimpse of one way of looking at Kabir's profile. These categories overlap, and no categories really fit this body of poetry, but we'll just use them for the sake of our discussion. I might do these differently on a different day, but for today, I'm saying one category is criticism. He's well known for looking out at the society and criticizing dishonesty, hypocrisy, cruelty, stupidity, hierarchy, prejudice. He's a very outspoken critic of caste and of religious sectarianism, not only Hindus and Muslims, but he also gets in a few words about Jains and Shaktas and yogis. This criticism is directed at society, but also at individuals for their own dishonesty and hypocrisy and so on. And the inner and the outer always imply each other in Kabir. A second category I'm calling today wake-up calls. All kinds of direct addresses to the listener. A lot of emphasis on death and impermanence, so that you ought to wake up before it's too late. Psychological insights, observations, playfulness, and satire in the interest of waking us up. Here's a Saki that you may have heard that I'm putting in the category of wake-up calls. Jon til mahi tel hai, jon chakmak mein aag, tera sai tuj hi mein hai, jag sake. So to jag. As oil is in sesame seed, like oil in sesame seed, like fire in an ember, your God is in you. If you can wake up, wake up. The third category I'm putting today as experiences of ultimate reality. This would be the mystical experience or the awakening experience, ecstatic experience. Tends to be in non-dual terms, often mingled with theistic language of God, often using yogic language. There's a tremendous amount of yogic imagery in the poetry of Kabir, used to describe the processes and experiences in the body, beyond the body. Some of these poems are very profound, strange, joyful, and startling in imagery, including the paradoxical poems known as Ulat Bansi, or upside down language. Finally, there is the language of lover and beloved, as well as supplication. The lover and beloved sometimes in union, but more often in longing and suffering and separation, or viraha. This style is more typical of Krishnaite poetry than of the so-called Kabir profile, but it is there in all the collections and popular songs. Something interesting about Kabir is that often a poem will refer to the lover and beloved and then switch to a yogic or a non-dual register, saying, your beloved is inside of you, so sit still in meditation to meet your lover. So my conclusion on the question of where we should look to find Kabir, written or oral, old manuscripts, printed books, living oral traditions, and performative traditions, my answer is all of it. Look at all of it. As scholars, we have been wedded to written texts. As literary scholars, we are inclined to grab hold of the earliest text and cling to it. But I've argued in the book that I showed you for a more multidimensional approach to understanding who Kabir was and is, and where to look to find him. Now, I vowed to keep track of the time, but I have forgotten to look at my watch, but I hope I'm halfway through because I'm about to go into part 2.
You have enough time. Carry on.
Okay. All right. actually, there's something I've got, just a second. I've gotten my, I've done something with my PowerPoint that maybe I don't have all the slides in here that I thought I had. Well, actually, I don't. So I'm going to stay on the slide where we just were. And I thought we had a few more in between, but you'll just have to listen carefully and not have the backup of the PowerPoint. So now, part 2, I've called Content and Language in Kabir's Poetry Associated with Muslims and with Discourse about Hindus and Muslims. This is something I was just inspired to look into because I'm speaking to Adi Granth today. I realize it's a bit dangerous to try to talk about a topic like something like Muslim and Hindu content in a body of literature, or to differentiate sharply between language that is derived from Sanskritic or from Perso-Arabic origins. I also know it's important not to insert our modern histories and our current ways of thinking about Muslims and Hindus into the 16th and 17th centuries. I'm trying not to do that. This is a new exploration for me, so please forgive me for my mistakes and help me to correct them. It would be delightful in this part of my talk to play for you examples of contemporary singers from India and Pakistan who are singing songs with the name of Kabir that have strong Sufi content and Perso-Arabic language. I'm sure many of you have heard them. For instance, Haman hai ishq mastana, Haman ko hoshiari kya. You could get performances of this beautiful song on YouTube by Shubha Mudgal, by Shafi Muhammad Fakir in Pakistan, by Madhu Mudgal, by Shabnam Virmani, and even by a rock group, the Kabir Cafe. You can also hear this Murshid Naino Beach Nabi Hai, sung very hauntingly by Madhu Mudgal on the internet. You can hear Pakistani Kawal Farid Ayaz singing Kabir Dohas and many other things. But because of the limited time, I'm going to give my examples only from the old Rajasthani manuscript that I'm working on. As I go through the hundreds of poems in this collection, I notice that language in the Sanskritic family is predominant in most of the poems, with various Indo-Persian words mixed in. But in some poems, I notice a predominance of Perso-Arabic language with clear Sufi orientation. I also see many examples of poems with mixed language that reference Muslim and Hindus. This piques my interest, so I start keeping track of things. So I find, for example, the Vaishnav names of God, Ram, Hari, Govind, Gopal, etc. I find Muslim names of God, Allah, Khuda, Karim, Rahim, and so forth. I look at how various word pairs showed up, someplace Karta, creator, someplace Khalik, creator, someplace Prakash, light, someplace Nur, light. I noticed all the references to Pandit, Mullah, Qazi, temple, mosque, Kashi, Kaaba, Ekadashi, Ramzan, Puja, Namaz, Guru, and Pir. So many modern Kabir Panthis sound like Vaishnavas in the way they speak and in the way they organize their pant and their ritual life. Some even say outright, we are Vaishnavas, which in a modern context is pretty much the same as saying we are Hindus. The scholar David Lorenzen has traced the historical process that led to this result in an article called Kabir Panth, Heretics to Hindus. Jack Hawley has written a paper called Can There Be a Vaishnava Kabir? And his answer is yes. I'm not willing to go that far, but here are some pieces of evidence regarding Kabir's Vaishnava or Hindu manifestations. The body of Kabir poetry, excuse me, my cough drop. The body of Kabir poetry from the earliest manuscripts to the currently popular songs is marked by continuous use of Vaishnav names for God. Ram, Raghurai, Hari, Govind, Gopal, Murari, Madhav, Keshav, and so on. The language of yoga and tantra is very prominent in Kabir's poems of liberation. language associated with broadly Hindu traditions of the Nath yogis, and earlier going to Hindu and Buddhist tantras. Kabir also uses language for ultimate reality or the supreme being that we would call nirgun, beyond form and attributes, derived from Hindu traditions, Brahman, Nirakara, Shabda, Anahad, strings of negations reminiscent of the Upanishadic not this, and so on. Many believe that Kabir was the disciple of the famous Hindu guru Ramananda. Much more could be said of Hindu associated religious content in Kabir. But also, Kabir's name is Kabir. Everyone knows that he was raised in a family of Muslim weavers, a caste called Julaha. There are very few facts about Kabir's life that everyone agrees on, but this is one of them. We don't know what this upbringing meant about his family life, about what being Muslim meant to them, when they and the members of their community became Muslim, or what associations or practices might have been part of his life. However, we know for certain that Kabir was interested in the presence of both Muslim and Hindu communities all around him in the city of Kashi or Varanasi. He made many references to them. These references appear in every major manuscript collection, and they continue to appear through all the centuries of oral and written traditions, including popular modern bhajans. So as I look more closely through this lens, I'm able to raise some historical questions, though I'm not yet able to answer them. And here are the questions that I've put together for your consideration. Maybe some of you will work on this and answer them. What can we learn about Kabir and his audiences, specifically by studying references to Muslims and Hindus in the poetry? Over the centuries, have Kabir and his followers become more associated with Hinduism and Bhakti and less so with Islam and Sufism? Was there an early presence of Kabir in Muslim or Sufi environments that is still insufficiently studied by scholars? Might that presence be further obscured by the fact that our major early sources of Kabir texts were written by Dadupanthis and Sikhs? The percentage of poems in a fully Sufi voice with important terms in Persianate language is very small in the early manuscripts. Why is this? Is it because of the preferences of the Dadupanthi and Sikh scribes? Is it because Kabir himself did not use this language much, if at all? Did Muslim interest in Kabir change and dwindle till it was much less prominent from the 18th century onward? Though I'm not ready to answer these questions, I can point to a young scholar who is opening them up in a wonderful way. His name is Murad Mumtaz. He's an assistant professor of art history at Williams College. And he's written a paper in which he shows that examination of Indo-Muslim sources can open new doors to our understanding of Kabir. And I'm just going to give you a quotation from Murad's paper, which I've put on the PowerPoint so that you can actually absorb it more fully, even though I'm going to read it out loud. This is based on both visual and literary culture, the legacy of Kabir. He says in this paper, I will examine literary and visual evidence from the 16th and 17th centuries to show how one of the most important devotional poets of South Asia was imagined and understood within the framework of Indo-Muslim devotional culture. By collating images of Kabir with contemporaneous literary accounts produced by Muslim authors for Muslim audiences, I aim to address two major lacunae in Kabir studies. First, the lack of scholarly attention given to depictions of Kabir as found in North Indian schools of miniature painting. They were popular, Kabir and his son Kamal were popular subjects in 17th and 18th century Mughal painting. Second, the fact that scholars have primarily viewed Kabir through the lens of Hindi sources without giving the parallel stream of Indo-Persian literary material the same level of importance. Some concerns that have been driving my recent research are to understand why Muslim communities care so much about Kabir and what is the role of the elusive figure of his son Kamal. And then Murad also mentions the writing of Dara Shikoh which I'm not going to try to pronounce, excuse me. But Kabir features prominently in a compilation of ecstatic utterances of saints written by Dara Shikoh. By using a specifically Sufi vocabulary, Dara Shikoh characterizes Kabir and his legacy through an Islamic lens. Now, I would like to take a few minutes in my conclusion to give you a few examples of the poems that I'm referring to. In terms of both content and language, I'm looking at explicit references either to Muslims only or to Muslims and Hindus together, including words that refer to their typical authority figures and practices. I'm also looking at poems that have a strong prevalence of Perso-Arabic language and Islamic names of God. The examples I picked out, one each, are first the critical type, as this slide shows you, poems that strongly criticize one or both sides for their delusion, hypocrisy, and so on. Second, poems that positively declare that Muslim and Hindu versions of God are all equally true, powerful, and good, thus denying claims that they are separate and irreconcilable and pushing the listener to transcend these narrow sectarian symbols. And the third type, poems of joyous affirmation, liberation, mystical union, whose language places them entirely in a Sufi register. I might mention that there's one poem in our manuscript whose language is so Persianate that the learned scholar and tikakar Madhaprasad Gupta says in his tika, "Ye pad Farsi mein hai aur anek shabdon ke arth spasht nahi hai, fir bhi niche yathasambhav arth dene ka ek prayas kiya ja raha hai." You know, he says, this poem is in Persian and has many very words that are not clear to me, but I'll still do my best to give a tika. Well, it's not really in Persian. It just has a huge amount of Persian vocabulary. I'm not going to give you that one today. It's a very difficult one. But that's how far this manuscript goes. Wait, before I give you that one, I'll just give you an example in English translation of one very critical poem that focuses on criticism of a Muslim figure, and that is the figure of the mullah who performs the ritual slaughter of animals. The Kabir poetry is very much against slaughter of animals. So here's a few lines from this in English. Don't ask if Veda or Quran is wrong. Your thinking is wrong. First contemplate the oneness of all. Only if you make it two can you kill. You kill chickens and goats, shouting over and over, God is truth, God is truth. God loves every living being. Where will you take refuge? So another poem that I've actually lined up for you, I have it all, of course, in Hindi script from the manuscript, is another somewhat critical poem. I think because of time, I won't really read it out in Hindi, but just for a different experience, I will read it out with the translation in front of you on the screen. Hey Mullah, why are you yelling at something far off? Ram Rahim is everywhere. Allah isn't deaf. See Allah in the universe, in the world, in your heart. My call to prayer sings Hari's praise. My sacrifice cuts the lifeblood of lust and rage. Kabir says, that mullah's a liar. I see Ram Rahim in all. Now here, this one, some of you may have heard, and this is really a nice example because it's both in the 400-year-old manuscript and it is sung today. You can find it on YouTube. I won't read the whole thing, but you may have heard the opening. Hamare Ram, Rahim, Kareem, Kesa, Allah Ram, Sati Soi. If you don't mind, I'll read this out in English and then I'll just give you a taste of Shubha Mudgal singing this. Our Ram, Rahim, our Keshav, Kareem, our Allah Ram are all true. Bismillah, Vishwambar, one, no other. These people have Qazi, Mullah, Prophet, Peer, and Allah in the West. Those people have Brahmins, puja, Ganga, Ekadashi, and God in the east. Turks, Hindus, mosques, temples. Khudaram is in both. When mosque and temples disappear, the presence of God is where? Hindus, Turks, their roads are fractured, ruptured, splintered, cracked, up, down, 10 directions, every place and space completely filled with Ram. Says Kabir, I'm Das and Fakir. Sister, brother, you better get on the road that leads to the self. Hindu and Turk have one creator beyond what we can see. Now, I want to show you, I hope this works. This is from one of Shabdam Virmani's films, and this is Shubha Mudgal, who many of you have seen and heard. And just 2 minutes, she makes a little comment about the political relevance of Kabir and how classical musicians often don't pay attention to the political and social meanings of their music. And then she just sings the opening of this bhajan. You can get the whole bhajan on YouTube. And comments on Kabir's sharpness and critical voice. I'm just moving it to the right spot.
Very often classical musicians in particular tend to stay away from social and political issues. I think the music itself is so wonderful and heady and absorbs you and completely obsesses you so much that you do actually tend to come and sit in your little ivory tower and never find out what's happening outside. Or at best you feel, ye to siyasat hai, hum kya kar sakte hain, you know, hum to artist hain. It's almost as if the music of protest, the poetry of protest never existed. हमारे राम रहीम करीमा के सो अल्लाह राम सत सोई हमारे राम रहीम करीमा के सो अल्लाह राम सत सोई. I enjoy singing something as direct as this. What does it mean? हमारे लिए राम, रहीम, करीम और केशव सभी सत्य का एक नजरिया है. Perhaps singing Kabir is one way of saying what I want to say about a situation like by the fanaticism, religious fanaticism that one sees today. I think it's a wonderful way of saying it all, and sometimes I feel I want to even sing those pieces of Kabir that are really quite very strong, very very forthright and downright rude also, like Man na rangaye jogi kapada, man na rangaye. The rest of the piece is really quite rude. It says ke पत्थर पूछ के क्या होगा या दाढ़ी रख के क्या होगा. So it really दाढ़ी रख के बना जोगी बकरा. So but I think even those pieces at times need to be sung.
Okay. Excuse me, I'm trying. Is the screen still showing for you? Because no. Yeah, this is my very last poem, and this is the end of my talk. I wanted to conclude with a beautiful poem of Joy and Ecstasy that is so beautiful in the original. And you can see that the language, it begins with Ya Karim, and it ends with Ya Rab. So it's, let me just read it to you, and then that'll be the last word of my presentation. Ya Karim bali hikmati teri, kak ek surat bahut teri. Arda gagan mein neer jamaya, bahut bhanti kari noor nipaya. Only Adam Pir Mulana Teri Sifati Kari Bhaye Divana Kahe Kabir Yahu Heta Vichara Yarab Yarab Yara Hamara. You notice how beautifully that last half line is composed, so it goes straight from yara ba yara ba yara hamara. And I'd like to read it in English, and then I'd like to stop. Of course, the translation is a draft. Ah, generous Kareem, I bow to your skill. Countless countenances from the same dust. You gathered waters beneath the sky, created endless forms of light. First Adam, then the wise masters, great scholars who sang your praise in ecstasy. Imagining this love, Kabir says, "Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, my friend." So thank you very much for your attention. And now I guess we will have some discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Hess, for introducing Kabir to us. Excellent presentation. In fact, during the course of your talk, you asked a question to the audience that when you think about Kabir, what exactly are you reminded of? Well, as far as I am concerned, I would say that while thinking of Kabir, there are two things which come to my mind. And one of them is monism, the philosophy of what during Akbar's period came to be known as, Wahdatul Wujud, which was very common among the Sufis also. In fact, Muhaddis Dehlavi once did say that Kabir is a muwahhid. So that is one of the things which come to my mind as a historian. And secondly, the fact that Kabir stood for anti-ritualism. He's against all type of rituals, performances, which make a particular culture of a community. So anti-ritualism, of course, there is also this anti-caste feelings, but these are the two takes which actually comes to the mind of a typical person who studies history. Before I start taking up questions, I just wanted to make certain of my own comments, and then I would be putting up the questions, some of the questions which have been asked by the public, by our audience who have been listening to you. You are quite correct that there are certain verses of Kabir where the Perso-Arabic terms, they predominate. There is, much use of the Perso-Arabic terms. Now, as a historian, I just don't know. You also pointed out when you started your lecture and during the course of the lecture that many things, many dohas which have been attributed to Kabir might only be attributions, may not be his. So is it a fact that sometimes when there were certain others who were attributing these dohas to Kabir and they were trained in the Perso-Arabic traditions, were they the ones who were adding these particular, terms to those dohas? That is one of the questions which actually I would want an answer for. But as you know that Kabir is not the only one during the medieval period who has left behind, such traditions. There are others as well. There are many others starting from Amir Khusro himself. Another very interesting fact, which I find from your lecture is that how the reception of Kabir has been during the medieval period. During the period which followed later on. I would just point out, a work which was written in Persian. I have pointed it out in one of the earlier lectures also, and I am again pointing it out that there is a taskira, which was composed during the period of Shah Jahan. And from this taskira, we come to know that a legend which actually was attributed to to Kabir was now re-attributed to Nanak.
Yes.
There is a Taskira Pir Hasuteli, and he's a Muslim follower of a saint, of a Hindu follower of a Muslim saint of Lahore. The name of the writer is Surat Singh. He is writing a versified account for his Pir, in which he is giving his own personal details as well. And he mentions the incident which happened after Guru Nanak had died. And the incident which he describes is the same which otherwise is related about Kabir. That is, after death, both the communities, followers of both the communities, gathered together at the site where the body of Nanak was kept. They fought with each other whether we should bury him or should we cremate him. And ultimately, when they were fighting, the body disappears and replaced by flowers. Ultimately, both the communities, they divide the flowers and perform the last rites. We know that this was a legend which was actually originally belonging to Kabir. That is a very interesting fact that the legends which were once attributed with Kabir are now being repeated for the other saints during the Mughal period. One another thing which I would have loved you to talk about is the representation of Kabir in the Mughal miniatures. In one of the
there is a scholar who is working exactly on that. He's an art historian, and talk to him. He's doing some very wonderful work.
Well, one of the previous scholars who delivered a lecture in our series also showed us a Mughal miniature of Shah Jahan's period, where on the Hashia, on the margins, Kabir has been depicted. He showed another miniature of Shah Jahan's period. Presumably, it was Shah Jahan's period, I think, where many saints are sitting there, and one of them is Kabir himself. So, these memories of how Kabir remained prominent throughout these centuries is something which needs a proper research for us to understand. I'm sorry, I took much of your time by making these comments, which I don't think were needed after your lecture. But let me start with some of the questions which have been asked. There is a question by Hasnain Aziz. Hasnain Aziz asks, can you please shed some light on the influence of Kabir on Sikhism? Was Kabir a heterodox Muslim, or had he renounced Islam?
So, of course, Kabir has a great influence on Sikhism because the gurus themselves, the compilers of the Guru Granth Sahib, made him the most prominent, the most important Bhagat, aside from the Guru's own poetry, in the Guru Granth Sahib. And so obviously he was tremendously respected and considered to have a great kind of kinship with Guru Nanak, slightly senior to him in his life, in the period that he lived. And they continued to sing Kabir all down through the centuries. So it is they consider him one of their most, respected ancestors and Bhagats. We don't know if Kabir was a heterodox or any kind of Muslim. We don't know anything about it. Or if he renounced Islam. Absolutely, the facts that everybody agrees on are this small. And then the legends pile up. As Professor just said, Like that is a famous story about the death of Kabir and the Hindus and Muslims fighting over his body. I use that story in the opening of one of my chapters, and also tell how it became the same story that was given to Guru Nanak. And this world of oral traditions, not only of the poetry but of the stories and everything surrounding these figures, is a vast open market. It's like the true free market, not the capitalist free market of stories and poetry. They pick it up, they change it, they attribute it to this saint or that saint. So all we have is stories, and we don't know at all what kind of a Muslim he was when he was born, or what his view of Islam was later. We don't know that.
Well, there are a number of questions by Dr. Ali Kazim. So I would ask the first one. He asks, Sheikh Abdullah Khweshgi in Marjaul Vilayat and Muhammad Ghulam Sarwar in Khazinatul Asafiya deny Kabir's discipleship to Ramananda. They refer to him as Malamatiya, Ovaisiya, or even Firdausiya. What is your take on that?
So I'm not competent. First of all, I don't even know when these figures were alive. Are they modern figures or old figures? Sheikh Abdullah.
They belong to the
are they
period.
To which period?
To the 17th century, if I'm not.
Yeah, so this is the kind of knowledge that I really want to see brought forth. So I don't know about these particular figures and what they said about Kabir, but I want to know about it. Modern scholars have also argued whether it is likely that Kabir was actually a disciple of Ramananda or not. Jack Hawley says no, he doesn't think so. I think Purushottam Agarwal says yes, he does think so. All of their arguments are brought forth. They look at the Ramanandi sect and so on, and they see how this lore came forth. I don't have an opinion on it because I haven't done that scholarship. But this information that you've just brought forth is wonderful. Like that's the sort of information. Sufi teachers from the 17th and 18th centuries who make this claim, I didn't even know about that. I haven't studied that history. It's very, very good to know. So I should pass this on to Murad Mumtaz here, who is doing this research. And some of you should bring this forth and write about this. Ali Kazim, you please write about this.
Ali Kazim has a similar question. I would anyway ask that Abdur Rahman Chishti's Miratul Asrar talks about Kabir's discipleship to Sheikh Bheek, whereas the author of Dabistan-e-Mazahib categorically identifies him with Vaishnavite Vairagis.
Yeah.
So, he just wants your comment on that.
So I'm not going to state an opinion on this because this kind of question would require very serious historical study and amassing of evidence. And then you might end up just saying, these are all stories, we'll never know. But I haven't done that historical work. And, I'm not even a historian, but somebody should do that work. And ask yourself, what kind of evidence would be persuasive to you? Would the content of the poetry, how much Vaishnavite language there is in the poetry, would that be convincing to you? Or would you, because there's a lot, or would you think that maybe the Sufi content of the poetry has been sort of disappeared because of the nature of who has collected the written records? That's a job for a historian. Please, one of you historians do that.
Very correct. This text which I mentioned to you, the Tazkira-e-Pir Has-Suteli, this particular author, Surat Singh, who himself is a Malamatiya, a Hindu, following certain of the saints who are actually Muslims. He's also a poet, and so he keeps on attending the poetic sessions, mushairas, which take place in the evenings at Lahore. And if you read his account, one comes to know that poets and philosophers of various types would assemble together, and there would be an interaction of ideas. My answer to Ali Kazim would be that actually it is very difficult, as Dr. Hess pointed out, to actually pinpoint from where Kabir is deriving his ideas. The fact remains that during that period, 14th century or 13th, 14th centuries, all type of ideas are circulating. Some of them are influencing these philosophers and authors and poets directly, and some indirectly. But one thing is very sure, that whatever, I mean, when you read the poetry of Kabir, the verses of Kabir, similar ideas are found reflected in them, as were the ideas of the various Sufis belonging to various Sufi silsilas. It's a good topic, and as just pointed out by the speaker, that more research, serious research, is needed to be done on this field. There is a question by Digvijay Singh. Mr. Digvijay Singh asks a question: are you willing to entertain a thought that not all the poetry in our folk performance traditions may be as they were composed by Kabir?
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, I not only entertain that, but I've written a whole book examining that kind of question. But what else has Digvijay Singh?
He says that could it be that many got attributed to him later? Well, of course,
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Wait, is this the Digvijay Singh from Madhya Pradesh? Or is this a different Digvijay Singh? Because one time I was in Digvijay Singh's office when he was chief minister of Madhya Pradesh. Maybe is this a different Digvijay Singh, or is this that same one?
No, he's a different one.
Yeah. So absolutely, it's you can clearly see the dynamic of oral tradition. It's absolutely marvelous, and it'll turn your head around. And to use an aesthetic term from Indian tradition, it's adbhut. It's amazing to see the dynamic nature of the oral tradition. The same singer will change the words from one day to the next, or change the order of the words. Another singer will say, oh, well, I've put these new lines in because I don't think people will understand the old lines. I've made it clearer. But at the end, I say, Kabir kahe, so it's his responsibility. But there's no doubt about it. And it's a kind of amazing thing. So scholars lately, I'm happy to report, although we are always interested in the historical record, like what is the earliest and where can you get evidence? And then that keeps changing. We keep finding that, oh, we can get something earlier, or, oh, we can get the evidence of all of these Sufi peers, or, whoever you just mentioned, that we didn't have in our books before. We should add that evidence. And we want to know the earliest historical and the way the history developed, but we're also just kind of amazed, and we marvel at the creativity of the tradition itself. I could go on about this. I could be very excited about this.
One second part of the question, which was a very long, question and comment which he had made. I'll just, ask the last part of that. How is it that Kabir's compositions have transcended lingual borders with such relative ease over the centuries?
This is just, I think you mean the various forms of North Indian languages, not just international. I mean, also internationally in translation, Kabir has proved to be popular as well. He appeals to readers in my culture. But just sticking to India, Pakistan, this is again the power and the marvelousness of the oral tradition. In Madhya Pradesh, Kabir sings in Malvi, and in Rajasthan, Kabir has a notably Rajasthani, flavor. But people in Madhya Pradesh, they understand the Rajasthani singer, and that is a fact of language across North India, for example, that there's so many different forms of Hindi, Urdu, and yet people can understand each other. And the Kabir corpus, the Kabir material can take on the flavor, from the earth, the local earth. I hope that's what this person was asking about.
Right. Now, Srivat's ji, Srivat Goswami ji.
Hello, Srivat ji.
He has been hearing you, and he has a question. Does critical self of Kabir make his Muslim lineage weak?
I'm guessing that you mean by that since Kabir was critical of Muslim rituals and authority figures, that maybe Muslims have not accepted him so much. Is that what you mean, Srivatji? That he has been less appreciated in the Islamic world because he was so critical of Islam as well as Hindu? Is that do you think that was the nature of the question?
Possibly what he's trying to ask is a little different. He's asking that, Kabir is very self-critical. He's critical about, he says yes about that, but,
okay.
The manner that he's critical about his own beliefs and things, the legend being that he was born in a Muslim tradition, yet being so critical, is it because of that some people do not consider him or consider his Muslim lineage as weak?
Yeah. Srivat says that, yes, that's what he meant.
Yeah.
So, again, Shabnam Virmani in her films has captured some wonderful expressions of people. And I was with her when she was shooting in Benares, and we actually went into a shop that, they still have the silk weavers and the cloth shops in Benares that are often run by people in the same lineage, by Muslims. And we went into a cloth shop of silk store that had the name Kabir. It was called Kabir. So we went in there and said, could we talk to you? And then the people in that shop said, oh, well, who was Kabir? And one of them said, oh, I think he was some kind of a mahant. They thought he was some kind of a Hindu. And somebody else said, that some Muslims didn't like the way he criticized Orthodox Islam. So maybe that's true. Maybe over the centuries that has happened. But then if you find the Sufi singers, just reach out and listen to Farid Ayaz and Muhammad Shafi Fakir in that are available now online, and to the Rajasthani singer Mukhtiar Ali. Listen to them; they have a very different view of Kabir. So there may be Orthodox, or I don't know if I should even use that word. All these words get us into trouble. But there may be some Muslims who don't like Kabir being critical of Islam. There may be some Hindus who don't like him being critical of the Hindu authority figures. But there still remains this living stream of tradition that's kept alive by Sufi singers and others.
Well, ma'am, thank you very much for your lecture. And as I pointed out, that one of the very great figures, Muslim figures of medieval period, a person who was a theologian, Muhaddis-e Dehlavi, Abdul Haq Muhaddis-e Dehlavi, in fact, points out that Kabir was, after all, a muwahhid. He is being accepted by both the Muslim and the Hindu traditions. The fact that a person like Abdul Haq Muhaddis Dehlavi has such, or he says that I have heard from my father and grandfather that Kabir was a muwahhid, is a typical example of what uh, a muwahhid is a certificate which shows that the philosophies which represented the common cultures of India were, after all, accepted not only during the 14th century but down to the 17th and late 18th centuries in India. I once again thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us on this topic.
There are some people still asking questions, but have we run out of time?
No, we still have time, but Shagufta, can you put up the questions which I can't see? Any questions which have been left?
Okay.
Yeah, there is a question by Muhammad Aftab Alam.
Yeah.
It is generally assumed that, like other cultural items, literary and philosophical positions tend to get affected by the particular political atmosphere of the day. The kind of the ideas expressed by Kabir in a poetic genre contain some kind of revolt and critique of social and cultural processes. Can it be said that the phenomena of Kabir, like other plebeian social and cultural protests, were only possible in the absence of a centralized political authority and presence of diffused political authority?
Well, I don't know if that can be said, but I do know that whether there is a centralized or a diffused political authority, we always seem to have powerful voices, including voices of poets and other artists who do speak a language of revolt and critique of social and cultural institutions. We have those voices even today, in the presence of a strong centralized government in India. We still have strong voices of revolt and criticism of social and cultural and political processes. Of course, if the government is very repressive, that'll have an effect. But I think those voices are very, very reliable in history in many different settings.
Well, Aftab Saab, you are quite correct. I mean, it is one of the very prominent voice of political protest. Kabir, after all, represents the protest against the established ritualistic societies which prevailed during the period when he was living. And that is why one of the reasons that his protest poetry has been popular from the period when he lived down to the period when today we exist. He is as popular as he was.
I'd like to just make one point about that. One of the things I studied is reception, like which audiences are interested in which aspects of Kabir. And a lot of people that I've spoke to, especially urban people and educated and English-speaking people, but not only them, said we're especially interested in the critical and social political commentator of Kabir. And some of them said outright, I don't care about the religious part. Some of them said, like, I'm an atheist. I don't care about the religious part or mysticism at all, but I'm interested in the social and political critique. I want to just point out, and that's fine with me, if Kabir's voice is used for liberation and for true social and political liberation. But I just want to point out that Kabir is also equally, and more than equally, a poet of profound inner experience, a poet of very moving experience of awakening. And, just put that in your collection of information about Kabir, even if you're only interested in the political and social part.
Right. Is Shagufta, any other questions which have been left? So once again, thank you very much for such a beautiful lecture. Rupa Abdi says there are many myths and legends about the religious identity of Kabir with no authentic proof. What is your opinion on this?
So, Rupa, those myths and legends are also very interesting cultural and historical material. But if you're right here, sort of in the vicinity of a lot of historians. I don't know if you studied history or if you are studying, but that is the discipline of history. How do you read those? What kind of evidence do you take out of them? What constitutes proof? If something is not verifiable as fact, still, what importance and interest does it have? So study history and you'll know how to evaluate those and try to see what kind of inference you can make out of all the evidence that we have, including the poetry.
Is there any other question? Any other comment which I am unable to see?
Thanks to everybody who's put a question up or who's put a comment up, and thanks to my old friend Srivatsa Goswami, who has honored me by showing up here today. And thank you to you, Professor Nadeem, for inviting me. And thanks to Shagufta for making it all work smoothly.
At the end, one of our duties towards, there is this, so why not just
you're saying ask Linda G to sing. You don't know that what you're asking for here. This might not be the best way to close off. I told you that they let me sing on the stage with them, but without a microphone. If you had said to me like yesterday, we're going to make you sing, I would have kind of calmed myself down and pulled out something that I could sing without embarrassment. But
okay, don't sing, but at least recite to us one of the dohas of Kabir, which you find quite relevant for the present day world.
Oh, that I don't know. My mind blocks up and I can't remember. I should always have that ready. People always ask me that. Let me just think for a second. I already said that one in this talk, and I'll just say it again. Jon til mein tel hai, jon chakmak mein aag, tera sahib tujh mein hai, jaag sake to jaag.
Thank you very much. Thank you for entertaining the request which was made to you. Now, I would just announce to the public who have joined today that there is a very minor change in our forthcoming programs. On 15th of January, as announced earlier, we are going to have Dr. Audrey Trushke, and she would be discussing the Sanskrit narratives of Indo-Muslim rule. But on 17th of January, it would be none other than Professor Irfan Habib, who has kindly, agreed to be his lecture to be preponed a little. So on 17th of January, we have Professor Habib, who would be discussing Sufi Tazkiras Fawaidul Fawad, and Hamid Qalandar's Khairul Majalis. So if this day we had Kabir, one of the lectures in the next week, we would be dealing with certain of the Sufi texts. Once again, I would like to thank everyone who joined us for this program today, and for thank Dr. Linda Hess that so early in the morning, it was 5 o'clock when she had to, I mean, she must have woken up much earlier than that. She has been with us since 5 o'clock early morning, her time, although we are now enjoying a very good weather in India. But there, it's such an early morning. She woke up, dressed up, and appeared before us. And her talk was such that you could never make out that she has just come out of bed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'm taking Kabir's advice. Wake up.
Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye.